Okay, so what we're aiming to do this afternoon is to share with you, what I'm aiming to do is to share with you some of the results of our experience over many years and some of the results of recent research in neuroscience, education, psychology about the actual act of learning and study. So, I would like it this afternoon to be a dialogue more than a monologue. So if you have suggestions or if you have things that work for you or if you think that something I'm suggesting won't work for you, then raise it. Just talk to me. I don't want to just give a lecture for an hour and a half without you having the chance to share whatever you know. Okay. So these are my 4 aims for you this year. These are our 4 aims to ensure that you're really ready for your theory exams. And in particular in Year 11, the big theory exam is September. Okay? In each of the sciences in September, your exam is going to cover basically Unit 1 and 2. So all of terms 1, 2 and 3. Okay? It just won't explicitly cover the Unit 1 and 2 work you did in Year 10, towards the end of Year 10. So we want to make sure that you're ready for your theory exams and, in particular, that you have a good run as a practice for next year because your final theory exams in October next year count for 50% of your result. Okay? We want to make sure that you can do the best that you can next year on your student experiment and research investigation, which means this year you need to go all out to see how you do those so that when you come to do it next year, you're on top of it and you know what to do. Clear? You've done some preparatory work for that in Year 10, but you haven't really put a full student experiment and a full research investigation together at Year 11 standard yet, so we need to do that. The other thing I want you to do is I want you to learn how to manage your stress, because Year 11 was a step up from Year 10, Year 12 is another step up, and as this year progresses you're going to find it more and more challenging, and you're going to find some points of the year potentially stressful in terms of the amount of work that you have to do, number of assignments and things that are going to come thick and fast. And in this new system, we can't always coordinate the due dates as much as we could in the old one. You know, we can't always make sure that chemistry, physics and biology assignments aren't due in the same couple of weeks because the QCAA basically sets those dates. Does that make sense? So I want to look at a couple of things this afternoon to help with stress. And I want to make sure that you're prepared well for your senior year. Okay? That's what we want at the bottom. We want you to get to the end of this year, ready for next year, but more than that, really happy with and proud of what you've achieved this year. Okay? Now, I don't care if that means an award or, an A or whatever. That's not important to me. What is important to me is that you walk out the school gate at the end of the year, confident and knowing that you're prepared for Year 12 and you're proud of what you've done so far. Fair enough? Okay. So this afternoon is based, as I said, it's based on the science of learning. We're learning sciences, so we should take notice of the research in neuroscience, in psychology and in education, the scientific research, what the studies say, and we also have been doing this for a while. Okay? This is Year 39 for me in Villa. So while every class is unique and every individual is unique, the problems that you encounter each year are not necessarily very different from other years' problems. Okay? So, 2 overall messages I want to get through to you, and then we'll look at some detail. The first one is, if you really want to succeed at senior school level, the second most critical thing is to the first most critical thing is to take control of your own learning. Okay? We plan out the courses for you. We plan out lessons. We prepare materials and so on. But the difference between senior school and middle school is if you just do what we say, you'll do okay. But if you do what you need to do, you'll do brilliantly. Okay? Because you're the only one. If you're sitting down on Sunday, afternoon this weekend coming, and you're looking at all your subjects, you're the only one who can honestly judge what you need to do at that particular moment in time in each of your subjects. So you've got to start putting yourself in the driver's seat, not just doing what the teacher says. And one of the things you should have noticed by now is that in Year 11, we are less likely to set you every night specific homework, and we're more likely to say, okay, we're working on this topic, this is the program of study, this is what you need to have done, and we're going to be finished it by next Tuesday. And what that enables you to do is to juggle your work in physics with your work in bio, with your work in your other subjects and so on. But it enables you to plan out, decide what you need to know and what you need to do. Because the research is very clear. If you do this, if you decide that you're not going to let me tell you what to do in terms of what you need to do in terms of your work, if you decide that you're going to control, you're going to work out what it is you need to do, and you're going to do it, then you will retain the information much better and you will perform at higher levels. Okay? The single most effective indicator of success in school is what the psychologists call self-regulation. Okay? I'm sure you've all heard, if you've got wealthy parents, you'll do better in school because you've got more resources. If you've got natural IQ, you'll do better in school. The studies have consistently shown that all of those factors are outweighed by self-regulation. The ability of a student, to self-monitor, to know where you're up to in each subject, to know how you're feeling about each subject, and if that's a negative thing, to be able to talk yourself out of that and change that negative impression, to know what you need to do, to be aware of what you need to do, and then to go about and do it. Self-regulation is not only is it the highest indicator of success at school, but it's also, in life, the highest indicator of good mental health, physical health, and financial outcomes later in life. Okay? So if you're not a good self-regulator through your teens, your 20s and your 30s, you're more likely to suffer from chronic diseases like obesity, heart disease, those sort of things later in life. Okay? This is the time to learn self-regulation when you're your age. This is the time to learn to become aware of yourself, how you work, and how you best plan out your time and take charge. Okay? So that's my first overall message. The more you are able to take control of your own learning, the better you'll do. Okay? To be honest with you, right, I've got 15 guys in each of my physics classes, or 17 guys. Okay? I teach everybody the same. But does everybody in the room need exactly the same thing at the same time? No. So when I turn it over to you, that's when you need to really step up and say, okay, we're working on this, but I really need to get this done. Okay? I'm not saying, we're working on physics, but I really need to get my study religion done. No, I'm saying we're working on, these parts of waves, but I really need to go back to standing waves and get that sorted out, or whatever it happens to be. In other words, take control of your own learning. Make sense? I'm going to come back to this right at the end. Secondly, my second overall message is, you can't do this without investing time. Okay? I don't know what time you guys currently spend on average per night, but the expectation is this, that you would spend up to 3 hours a week on each subject outside of school. And that expectation is the same as the expectation you will have when you go to uni. When you go to uni, you will hear them say, if you have an hour's lecture, we expect you to do at least an hour's work out of the class. You have roughly 3 hours of physics a week, 3 hours of biology a week, 3 hours of chemistry a week in full periods. Okay? You need to do that much time outside. So that's 3 hours per week on each subject. That's on average 3 hours a night plus time on weekends. Okay? I was talking to Jamie Seafeld about this the other day, and his and my experience was pretty much the same. In Year 11 and Year 12, we studied for at least 3 hours every night, 5 nights a week, and all day Sunday. That's the expectation. Okay? If you think that's a hell of a lot, this is your full-time job. You do about 20 hours at school, well, you need to do about another 20 hours at home. Okay? In a week. And I have never found, I've had students who say to me, look, I just haven't got that time, I've got cricket, I've got this, I've got music, I've got that. Right? I have never found a student in 38 years here where if we sat down, we couldn't find the time. It's always a choice of how you use your time. Okay? And we could always find the time without cutting into the fact that you need at least 8 hours sleep. Okay? We'll see why a little later on. The sleep is actually critical to the learning. It's not just you being awake. It's critical to the process of learning. All right? So that's important. And this note, when you've got assignments on, that doesn't cut into those hours. Okay? Assignment work is on top of that, not replacing it. Okay? On assignments, just while I'm mentioning it, be careful of what we call the law of diminishing returns. Does anybody know what I mean by that? It's a phrase out of economics or something.
I mean, you study hard for one subject and then you'll progressively study less and less for it.
No. That's a nice try. No, the law of diminishing returns goes like this. Science assignments that you get, maths assignments that you get, they're assigned a certain period of time you're supposed to spend on them. Right? 10 hours, most of them. 10 hours. If you spend 10 hours, you'll get a certain mark. If you spend 12 hours or 14 hours, you might improve that mark a bit. But there is a point where spending any more time will not get you any more marks. Okay? That's the law of diminishing returns. I can put more time into it, but I don't get a return on that time. Okay? So, for example, some of the seniors, some of the 12s made this mistake last week and the week before. They had a maths assignment, okay, which was supposed to take about 10 hours. Some of them were putting 40, 50, 80 hours into an assignment. And to be honest, their mark didn't change for the last 30 hours of that work. But what happened in that 30 hours? They neglected other subjects. So they may very well have lost marks in other subjects by not gaining marks in their maths by spending the extra time. Do you understand what I mean? Now, it is a really tricky question to make. It's it's a really tricky question for you as a 16-year-old or 17-year-old to make the call that I have done the best I can on that assignment and I need to stop obsessing about it and move back to other things. Okay, that's a hard call to make. So listen to your teachers. When you get the draft feedback back and so on, right? Listen to them, and when they start to say, look, you're spending too much time on this, really listen to them. Because what we're saying is you're neglecting your other responsibilities and you're going to regret that. Now guys, senior guys said to me, but yeah, look, the maths assignment was summative. It's 20% of our final result. So, you know, why should I be doing physics? Why should I be doing chemistry when I've got 20% of my final result? And I just said, in that same time, we've done about 20% of the work for the final exam in physics. So it's not a choice between summative and doesn't count, it's a choice between summative now and summative later. So you could be losing marks without knowing it. Joe?
With that time set on an exam, on an assessment saying it's 10 hours,
Yeah.
that time be split into draft time and final time? So.
Oh, yeah. And look, to be honest, the 10 hours is never going to be enough. You're always going to spend 15 hours or so, you know? Because you're going to want to do your absolute best job. My point just is that there's probably no difference in the final product between something that you've spent 15 hours on and something you've spent 35 hours on. You understand what I mean? Okay. And as I said, it's a hard decision to make. It's a hard thing to call sometimes, but it's the most common error I see students make, is just lurching from one crisis to the next, one assignment to the next, rather than pulling up stumps and saying, no, that math methods assignment is good, that physics assignment is good, and so on. Okay? Because you always feel if you spend a little bit more time, it'll, you know, if you just fix up this bit. But you've got to look at the ISMGs and say, is that going to be rewarded? Because if it's not, don't do it. Okay? All right. Important thing about the time is to make sure that it's regular time. It was another thing that came out of the little chat I had with Jamie the other day, is that for both of us, our families knew that when we were studying, we were studying. And they didn't make calls on us during that time. You know, didn't expect us to be doing something else. I used to study from 7:30 till 10:30, 11 every night. And then I'd get up at 7:30, quarter to 8 the next morning. So I can't go home. I couldn't go home when I was your age. I couldn't go home from school at 3 o'clock. I didn't go home from school till about 5, but I still couldn't do anything till after dinner. I needed to just clear my head. So we'd have dinner. Everything would be finished by 7:30 because in those days television was relatively new. Colour TV had just come out when I was in year 10. So the family would sit around the TV at night, and that was a big social thing. My grandmother used to live next door. She would come over, and she didn't have a TV, so she'd come over and everybody else would sit around the TV. I would disappear into my room at 7:30. And the family knew that I would be there until 10:30, 11 after they went to sleep. Okay? Sundays, they knew that unless it was some major event, I wouldn't be available from after Mass until the end of Sunday, because that was my block day. Okay? And I always found that I needed a block day to be able to shift things around and do longer tasks and so on that I couldn't do on a weeknight. Okay? There's a real benefit of having it regular. And it also, believe it or not, having regular long blocks of time scheduled reduces stress. It doesn't increase it. Because if you're sitting down on Thursday night and you've got a plan for Thursday, Friday and the weekend, Right? I never did anything on Saturday. I always just did the work on most of Sunday. Whatever suits you is fine, of course. But if you're sitting down on Thursday night and you're doing physics and you think, oh, damn, I've got that English to do, but you've already got it scheduled for Sunday, then it reduces your stress because you can just look at your schedule and say, no, it's all right, I've got it there. It's going to be handled on Sunday. I don't have to worry about it now. All I've got to worry about is, what have I scheduled for tonight? You know? It's a small thing, but it makes a difference psychologically to how you cope. The research, now wherever there's something that comes out of the studies, out of the research, that little thing will pop up. The research says a habit can be formed in 2 weeks, so if it hasn't been your practice to have a regular study routine, you can get into a regular study routine in 2 weeks if you force yourself for 2 weeks. All right. Now, who has seen this video of me explaining how to use Moodle and OneNote? One person, despite the fact that I send emails to every science student saying, watch this. Good. Okay. Well, have a look at this. It's only 3 minutes. You couldn't take 3 minutes out of your life. I think it stopped.
There are 3 aspects to your study of physics, study of all the senior sciences: the classwork and homework, what we call coursework, your assignment work, and your exam preparation or study. Each of these aspects of your work require different techniques which you can learn and are best supported by different resources. The coursework, classwork and homework consists of lectures, class discussions, problem-solving practice, homework and the study with the purpose.
Stopped again. I think that's the video link.
Of understanding the concepts in the class and learning to master the skills needed to successfully apply those concepts. This is resourced by Moodle. On Moodle, you have the program of study for each term, which lists the topics and outlines the textbook sections, the exercises and problems associated with each topic. The program of study, along with the textbook sections, problem listings, tutorials, work solutions, class and topic videos and video work solutions, are all found on Moodle.
It's a dramatic pause.
This is what we work through in covering a topic or unit in class. The preparation for the data test, IA1, which is worth 10%, is also on Moodle. During the course, there are 2 major assignment types that you need to master: the student experiment, IA2, worth 20%, and the research investigation, IA3, also worth 20%. The summative versions of these assignments, the ones that count towards the result, your final result, are completed in Year 12, but you have formative versions in Year 11 and preparatory versions in Year 10. All of the material needed to learn how to successfully complete these tasks can be found on Moodle, where the draft and final versions of your assignments will be submitted via Turnitin as well. In Term 4 of Year 12, you have the external exams, worth 50%, which assess all material in Units 3 and 4 of the course. Throughout the course, you also have diagnostic exams to assess the development of your mastery of the course along the way. All of these exams assess your mastery of the knowledge and skills in the content, which is defined by the syllabus dot points and associated syllabus guidance. The syllabus dot points define the course from semester 2, Year 10 onwards. Your study of this content is resourced by OneNote. The class notebook contains all of the syllabus dot points for each of the 4 units.
This is true for all the
on a
sciences.
separate page.
Or
Each
physics,
page
chem and bio.
also details the glossary terms, textbook references, and some guidance and sample questions. This is provided to enable you to take and to keep your own notes on each dot point, so you have all of this material in one handy location. We strongly recommend that you keep this separate set of study notes in a physical book in handwritten form. You may wish to use a white lines type of book, which could be backed up to the cloud or your own OneNote for security's sake over the 2-year period.
Okay, so the best way of hiding something in plain sight, apparently, with you guys is to put it in a video and send an email around saying, watch the video. Okay? Now, I have, in my classes, and I know in the other classes, we've explained this before, that you have, your coursework is where you work on a day-to-day basis in the classroom. That's resourced by Moodle. That's where we put everything up for you to understand the stuff, and your purpose in the coursework is to understand the material. Okay? It's not really to learn it. To learn it is to remember it and be able to do it later. It's to understand the material. Okay? So that at the end of the topic, you then go to the class notebook on OneNote, and you turn your attention to answering this question. What have I got to do now so that I will know this in 6 months' time? Okay? And that's about doing the dot points. So I want to look at these two things just separately. Very quickly, what do we do in class each day with the coursework? And then what do we do at home with both the coursework and the dot point work? Okay? In class each day, it is so important that you are prepared. Okay? There is nothing more deflating to a teacher for a student to come into a senior science class and say, what are we doing today? Because if you listen in the previous lesson, you'll know what we're doing today. Okay? We will always foreshadow where we're going, what we're doing. You know? For somebody in year 11 and 12 to walk in and say, we're doing prac today, is just extraordinary. Okay? Because you should know as much as we do about what we're going to do. You've got the program of study. You know what the topics are. Okay? And if you've been listening yesterday, you will know much of what we're going to do today. So be prepared. Have all your stuff. Do all the work beforehand. In the class itself, be actively involved. You are going to be there for 45 minutes or 50 minutes. If you use the class time well, then you have to spend less time out of class because you've used the class time well. Okay? Get the most out of any time spent in class and any task done. And there's a simple way of doing that. Remember we said self-regulation is the most important thing. Knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it, deciding to do it yourself. You can get the most out of any time spent or any task done by asking yourself one simple question. When you're about to do the task, when the teacher has said, now I want you to do this, turn to page so and so, do this. What's the question you should ask yourself? Have a go, doesn't matter if you're wrong. What question should you ask yourself? Think of self-regulation, think of long term, think of your learning.
Do you need to know to answer these questions?
Close, very close. I'll put you out of your misery. Why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? Is the question you need to ask. Why am I doing this? Okay? If I set you, I'm going to use physics as an example because that's what I teach year 11s this year. If I set you in class, I say, okay guys, now I want you to do questions 1 to 9. Okay? And I set you up to do that. The first thing that comes into your head should be, why are we doing this? Because if you don't have an answer to that question, when you've finished, how do you tell if you've done it okay? If you don't ask that question, and I've set you questions 1 to 9, what is your task? Your task is to get 1 to 9 done. So when you got 1 to 9 done, you close the book, and what have you learned? Nothing. Or very little. Or whatever you've learned has been accidental. Okay? But if I set you questions 1 to 9 and you ask yourself, well, why are we doing this? Oh, I see. It's to drill this particular formula, or it's to make sure I know how to do this, or it's to give me different examples of how you can ask these questions. Then you do them, and at the end, you can go back to that question and say, okay, well now, am I drilled? Do I know how to do this? Have I seen different ways of doing it? You know, if you give yourself a purpose, you can then check at the end, have I met that purpose? And I can tell you, your purpose is never to have a lovely, neat set of answers. Because if we wanted that to be your purpose, what would we do? We would photocopy them and give them out to you. If your purpose was to create a set of work solutions to all our questions, that's what we'd do. We'd short circuit the process, stay at home, put our feet up, and give you a set of work solutions. That's not why we do questions. Okay? That's not why, in any subject, that's not why people give you tasks. They give you tasks with a particular purpose. And if you know what the purpose is, then you can check that you've met the purpose, that you've got what you needed to out of it. Does that make sense? So, what's the most important question you can ask in your own head when you're given a job to do? Why are we doing this? And it may be that your answer to why we're doing it is different from somebody else's. Because what you need at the moment out of this task will be different to what somebody else needs at the moment out of this task. And that's fine. Does that make sense? This is about taking control. This is about being in charge. This is about you doing what you have to do to get where you need to be. So you've got to step up. Okay? It's not a big step, but it's about looking after yourself. Not in a selfish way, but looking after yourself, taking responsibility for yourself. It's just a different way of thinking. Okay? You need to make your sole goal for each period not to walk out the door without understanding what's been taught. Okay? That's your purpose in a classroom. Not to get a great set of notes. Right? A set of notes is nice, but your purpose is to be able to walk out the door at the end of the period, understanding what you've done and being able to do what you were asked to do. Okay? So if that drives why you're in the classroom, then if you don't understand, what are you got to do? Ask, and then ask, and then ask, and then ask again. Okay? What does it mean to walk out the door understanding what you've done? Well, if you walk out the door and I meet you at the door, I should be able to say to you, Patty, can you tell me what you've just done? What have you done this period and what did you get from it? You know? And you would be able to explain it. You would be able to teach me what you've just done. That's what it means to understand. You would be able to teach somebody what you've done. Okay? Does that need a perfect set of notes? No, it does not. Okay? Why do you take notes? So that you can remind yourself that night of what you did in the class. But if you didn't understand it in the class, are you going to understand it that night? No. And at that night, you haven't got the resource available in front of you to ask. Okay? Now, here's a little trick from the research. If you want to focus your attention on that, making your sole purpose to understand, make this a rule. At the end of each period, write 3 words in your diary about the period. 3 words. Right? not your homework, you can write that in, but against each subject write 3 words. What 3 words are you going to write? What about? What are these 3 words going to be? What do you think would be your focus in writing these 3 words?
One would be the time it needed to study.
No. That's the technical stuff you're going to, right? Your homework and so on. At the end of each period, what 3 words or what type of 3 words are you going to write to help you focus in on your task, understanding things?
Like what you've learned in class.
What was it about? What was it about? Right? Standing waves in strings and air columns. That, I don't know, mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. Is that still true? Whatever. In 3 or 4 words, what's a summary of the period? Okay? Because if you're struggling to write down in 3 or 4 words what the period was about, what does it tell you? You weren't real focused or you didn't understand. Okay? Now, it's hard to do that, hard to remember to do that. How do you remember to do that tomorrow in 6 periods? You know, you're going to be rushing out the door and so on. Well, I'll give you a simple trick. Take a diary, you get an El Cheapo rubber band, you put it around it. So at the end of the period when you pick up your diary, you've got a rubber band, you think, oh, what's that for? Oh, that's right, I'm supposed to write 3 words. You do that for a couple of days and it'll become automatic. Okay. All right. Questions about in class? What do you do if? No? Got any questions?
So, what
Yep.
if you're having a bad day?
Oh, look.
It's like not feeling.
You or me?
Oh, for me, so
Okay. You have a few.
yeah.
Everybody's going to have a bad day. Teacher's going to have a bad day. You're going to have a bad day. The key thing is this. If you are normally on top of your work and you've got everything planned out and you're doing stuff, a bad day is not a disaster. Because you can always recover from a bad day if you're otherwise on top of things. But if you're otherwise scrambling and you're late to do this assignment and so on, a bad day can become a bad week and then a bad month and so on. Okay? So my advice is strive to be as organised and on top of things as you can, because we're all going to have bad days. And they're much easier to recover from, get back on top of, if the rest of life is plain sailing. Make sense?
In class, would you prioritise what the teacher's trying to teach you, or because would you try to take notes down on that?
That's a skill. You've got to really decide, first of all, how do I understand this? What do I need to do to understand it? Okay, that's got to be your first priority. Your second priority is, what record or artifact do I need to make that will help me remember this later? Okay? Too often in class, I see guys focusing on the second rather than the first. And instead of trying to understand it, instead of asking themselves active questions about it, well, what does this mean and how do you do that and what about if this and so on, instead of doing that, they're just furiously becoming human photocopiers and trying to make sure they get down every word of the PowerPoint and every word that the teacher says. Okay? If you focus on that, you walk out the door with a good set of notes that mean nothing to you. But if you focus on the understanding, you'll walk out the door probably with a mediocre set of notes that help you remember that you understood this. and what you understood. That's hard, and that's what you're learning to do. Okay. So, you know, in my classes, you don't write when I'm discussing something. Okay. I know that's not the case in all classes, that you're supposed to take notes while the teacher's talking and so on. I think you just make a cognitive choice, you make a deliberate choice to say, I'm not going to write anything down that I don't understand. And you stop them. No teacher will ever say to you, don't ask a question if you don't understand something. No? If you're sitting there and you don't understand what's just been said, it is so frustrating to us if you just sit there and don't say, hang on a sec, I just really don't get that. You know? Because we're going on with the next thing, hoping that you're going to make sense of that, and if you didn't make sense of what we did 2 minutes ago, you're not going to get the next thing. But all too often, I think, guys sit in a class thinking, I don't understand this, but everybody else looks like they do, so I better not say anything. You know, or I'll look dumb. Well, it's pretty dumb to sit there and not say anything. You know. Does that help at all?
Yeah.
All right. At home. The most important thing you can do is make this an absolute rule. Every night, touch every subject. Even if it's only 90 seconds on a subject, do what I call triage. Triage your day. You know what the term means? It comes from the medical model. If you go to the emergency department, a triage nurse will assess who needs to be seen first. In what order do these patients need to come in? Okay? So they're looking for seriousness and so on of the complaint. If you go into the emergency department with a sore throat, you can expect to be triaged to next Wednesday. All right? If you go in with a broken leg or a heart attack or something, then you will go up the rank. Okay? So triage your day. Whenever it is that you sit down at the end of a day to do study, to start your 3 hours or to build up to your 3 hours over a few weeks, from wherever you are now, sit down and triage your day. A quick review of each period. Period 1 we had English. What did we do? Oh, we did this, this and this. Okay. All right. And I have a look at my diary and say, this is what I need to do from English. But you've called it to mind. That's what I mean by touch every subject. At least call it to mind. Okay? Period 2 we had so-and-so. Period 3, the teacher was away, that's all right. Period 4, we did maths, and okay, we did this, this and this. The mere act of calling it to mind is actually studying. Even if it only takes 90 seconds. So quick review of each period, and make your list. Tonight, what needs to be done? Okay? And if there's something that came out of today that needs to be done that can't be done tonight, you schedule it. You put it over there on Saturday, or you put it there on Friday, or whatever. You put it in, and what does that do to the stress? Drops it because you've taken care of that. Okay? You haven't done it, but you've taken care of the fact that you need to do it, and you've got it scheduled in somewhere. Okay? And then, plan out attack for tonight. How will I get it done tonight? Alright. So what order? I've got these 4 things for these 4 subjects that I need to do in this 3-hour block. I don't need to do anything on English because we're just watching a video. I don't need to do anything on PE because all I need to do is remember to bring my clothes. No, sorry. Sorry? No, don't. So how am I going to do this? All right? Don't make the mistake of thinking, I love maths, so I always do my maths first. Yeah? Mix subjects up. Don't always do the things you love first. do physics some other time, not always first. Plan it out, make sensible decisions. All right. This can also gradually increase your time. If you don't sit down and say, I'm going to do 3 hours study, sit down and say, I'm going to get these things done. In other words, focus on getting tasks done, not on the time spent. Okay? I'm not saying set yourself tasks that are going to take 6 hours and start them at 7:30 at night. That's not going to work. But rationally and sensibly say, I can get these 4 things done tonight. That'll take about 3 hours, but don't focus on spending 3 hours. Focus on, I'm going to get these 4 tasks done for them. And if it takes a little bit longer, then you take a little bit longer. Okay? The shift doesn't end at 3 hours if another 10 minutes would finish you up or whatever. In each science, every night, every class that you walk away from, every science class that you walk away from, that night you should do this. Quickly review notes, check the textbook bits, and query your understanding. Okay? So you've spent the 45 minutes in class understanding this stuff. Now you're home, you've done your triage, you've included your physics or your bio study, you sit down to do it, you quickly have a look at what did we do, what's my notes today? Okay, this is my notes. I remember I needed to flesh that out a bit, so look at the textbook. Okay, and I just flesh out that definition a bit that I didn't get on my notes. Okay, and you query your understanding. That day you understood it. Do I still understand it? Can I make sense of it? Could I explain it to somebody? And you know what I'd do? Get up and walk away from it. See if you can explain it. You've got a whiteboard in your room? Get a whiteboard up on the wall. See if you can draw it up. See if you can explain it. If you can, you understood it. Okay? Yep.
In the triage,
Yes.
are we putting like specific tasks?
Yeah. Well, you have to. That's part of planning out your attack for that night. Yes, sir.
So, touching every subject, would that be the subjects you had in the day?
Yes.
Or
Periods
so-
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So not every subject?
No, you'll leave one out. Yep. Okay. So in the sciences, you've spent 10 minutes or so reviewing the notes. Then you go to do the problems and questions and worksheets. Okay. Most guys do this the wrong way around. They sit down and say, I've got homework tonight, I've got to do these 9 questions. So I try and do these 9 questions. And if there's any time left over in my half an hour for physics, I'll do some study. No, do the 10-minute study first, then do the problems, because you'll get them done twice as fast once you've done the study. Okay? And then, finally, anticipate tomorrow. What are we going to do tomorrow? We've got that prac tomorrow. Hang on, I've got to read the prac. Anticipate what needs to be done tonight to make sure you're on track tomorrow. Okay? That's what I think you should do in any block that you sit down at night after a science lesson. Physics, chem, bio. Okay? Notice what is not there is any assignment work. That is extra. Okay? You never go home saying to yourself, I'm just going to belt out this English tonight. No, you've got other work to do because you had 6 classes. And within reason, if it takes longer, it takes longer. Right? If it's obviously going to take another 2 hours and it's 11 o'clock, no, you have already cut and run. But if it's 10 o'clock and you can see another quarter of an hour is actually going to get this finished and you'd be all set for tomorrow, then you do it. So?
With assessment work set, when would be the best time?
Assignments, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
After all this, like after you've
Oh,
gone through something,
no.
just plan
No, you plan it in your week in such a way that you're working at a good optimal rate. I would always, myself personally, I always did assignment work on a Sunday, right? Because this is, each night, this is small chunks. This is 20 minutes of this, half an hour of that, so on, okay? Assignment work needs to be an hour of this, an hour of that. So you need more time, okay? I had mates who only did assignment work before school. They worked in the mornings before school. Right? It never worked for me. I couldn't do it. Right? I lived around the corner from the school when I was your age. So I got up at 8 o'clock, got to school at 8:15, carrying my breakfast. I could work better late at night, and I couldn't work in the morning. Right? But you just got to find time. Okay? You schedule it into your week. If you've got 2 or 3 assignments on, and it's a bye this weekend or something, then you take advantage of it and schedule Saturday and Sunday. Not on the routine stuff, on the extra stuff. Okay? Yep.
So with general homework and study each night, will that help you towards your exams and stuff like that? And
That's
within
the
your
purpose.
Half an hour, and then your assignments add on to that, which
Yeah.
doesn't add on to your traditional half an hour per subject.
Yep. That's the purpose.
So what would you study on the weekends?
Sorry?
What would you study through the weekend? Would you just summarize your week?
I'll show you, sort of thing. Okay, so the important thing is to have a plan and to stick to it. That's what it comes down to. Now, some seemingly random bits of advice for when you're working at home. Work with paper and pen wherever possible. The research is very clear. Both in class and at home, if you work with paper and pen, you will remember, retain, and perform better later than if you work on a computer. Okay? Now, computers are excellent. If you've got a CAD assignment, there is no way of doing it without a computer. That's, you got to do it. If you're composing or something, then you're probably going to be doing a computer, using a computer. But if you're doing problems or whatever, don't have the thing open. If you're doing research and you need to use the computer, that's fine. But if you're trying to make sense of something, if you've got a choice between a paper textbook and looking it up on box of books, get rid of the computer and use your paper textbook. Writing notes with paper and pen, neurologically, much quicker learning because it's much slower writing. Okay, more effective. And it actually goes through the brain. If you're using a computer to take notes, you most often Control-C, Control-V. The words don't go through the language centre of your brain. All you're learning is Control-C, Control-V. Muscle memory, not actual content. Okay? No music ever while working. All right? And I know you'll argue with me and say, no, I'm much more effective. It's much better when I'm studying to have some music on. I don't have music with lyrics. It's just, classical music. No, does not work. The research is exceedingly clear on this. All right? You think it's working better because it's more enjoyable, but it's not effective. If you want to, sit down and listen to a track, then put the headphones away and do some work. That's fine. That's okay. That's fine. If you want to listen to music, it's pleasant. You can listen to music, and then you do your work. But if you try to work while you're listening to music, you are halving, effectively, the bandwidth that you can process information with. Because the parts of the brain that you use to listen to the music are the same parts of the brain that you use to think and form words and so on about the work you're doing. Now, if you were trying to download something, to stream something, and somebody in your family throttled the internet to half speed, you would be pretty annoyed. So don't do it to yourself by putting music on, because you're throttling your brain. Yes?
If you think about a song while you work, would that be detrimental as well?
Yes.
Like, yeah, hum along, you're like,
Yes.
it's not a song, it's an OC song. So, like, you go-
Take yes for an answer.
Yes, okay.
No phones, smartwatches in the room. Okay? In the room. Don't just put them on silent. Don't even turn them off. Okay? The research study from 2 years ago showed that the presence of the phone, even completely switched off, turned upside down, out of sight, in your pocket or in a bag, still takes bandwidth from your brain. Okay? Take the opportunity, put them on charge in the living room or the kitchen while you're working in the bedroom or wherever you work. Okay? Don't have them near you.
So yesterday I was doing this chem question and I needed help, so I called up Ryan on my phone. So wouldn't it be a little harsh to have the phone not in the room, just in case someone needed your help?
No. No. No.
Would you call them? No. Would you leave the room, call them, sir, and then come
Next.
back?
Computers on only if necessary. Okay? I've almost got my students out of the habit of walking into the room, opening a computer and sitting down. Okay? Computers are fantastic tools, but they're only a tool. And if you don't need them, they're not helpful. Okay? If you're not actually using it for a computer, if you're using it for a textbook bookshelf, go to IKEA. Okay. Your aim is to have as much time as possible in what we call inflow. When you are in flow is when you are most effective. When you're focused, you know what you've got to do, you've got the resources, and you're busy doing it. Okay? The most distracting to inflow is music, phones, computers. Okay? All right. Now, just from a practical viewpoint, don't sit down after dinner and try and do 3 hours study. Break it up, chunk it up a bit. Take breaks every 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever you need, for a couple of minutes. But in those couple of minutes, don't go and check your phone. No screens. Okay? Get a glass of water, get a piece of fruit, walk around the house. Don't look at TV. Okay? You don't want to get out of flow, you just want to have a break for a minute. And this one. Again, like in class. The most important question you could ask yourself when you're doing something in class is, why are we doing this? It's exactly the same at home. Think about how you're working. With each question that you do, stop before you move on. What do I take from this? It's another way of saying, why am I doing this? Yep,
When you say jump it up and take breaks, how long do you recommend for the breaks? Like
a few minutes, a couple of minutes.
If you can, should you move your laptop out of the room as well?
No, laptops don't seem to take bandwidth if they're turned off. Not like phones. Okay. Another study 2 years ago showed that every distraction, this was in an office environment, and people had their phones on silent and turned over on their desks, but every time a message came through, and these guys were ergonomically tracking the efficiency of these guys working, they were doing computer tasks, whenever a message came through, even if they didn't look at it, efficiency dropped and took about 20 minutes to get back to where they were before the message came through. So this is when a buzz goes off. Why? You know enough about your brain and so on to know why does efficiency go down? Temptation to look at your phone. You're interrupted and you start to wonder what is the message. Yeah.
You lose your focus and you think about it.
Yep. And there's a hormonal balance, thing going on there. All right? Whenever we get a message, neurotransmitters are released in the brain. It's positive. Okay? You get a dopamine release, even without looking at the message. Because what is the buzzing saying? Somebody has reached out to you. Somebody has connected with you. And as a human species, that's rewarding. That's rewarding neurologically. Okay? So, when that buzz goes off, the brain gets fried for 30 seconds. It takes a while to recover from that. Because hormones are released. That's what happens. Okay? All right. Don't believe anybody who says they can multitask, particularly in studying. The human species is not able to multitask. Whenever we think we're multitasking, we are actually jumping from one linear task to another and back again. And that's not multitasking. Don't try and do two things at once. Having a schedule and sticking to it reduces stress. As I've said to you before, earlier this afternoon, the mere fact that you can say, no, look, I've got that covered, it's in my schedule for Thursday, reduces the stress now. Okay? Anybody have a problem with getting started? Oh, all of us. Okay, good. The only way to fight procrastination, I think, in my experience, and in the research, is just decide to do 10 minutes. Most procrastination is because of an overwhelming sense that there's too much to do. You're not going to get it finished. Okay? Not all, but most procrastination is because of that. Now, two things. If you've got a plan documented on the fridge, saying I'm going to do this then and this then that helps reduce the overwhelming nature of the task. But secondly, if you suffer badly from procrastination, then go home one night and just sit down after dinner and don't say I'm going to do 3 hours. Just say I'm going to do 10 minutes on this assignment. And when you sit down, what you'll find is you do at least 20 minutes, if not half an hour. And that changes your approach to it. Right? Don't say I'm going to do 3 hours on this. Say I'm going to do 10 minutes. And sit down and do 10 minutes. Put the clock on. Do 10 minutes. And what you'll find is you just turn that off and you keep going for a bit. Most times. Okay? The problem is not getting it done. The problem is starting. Starting a 4-hour task or a 6-hour task or an 8-hour task is impossible. Starting a 10-minute task is not. Okay. All right. Now, the next bit, this is from the Year 12 workshop last week, but the next bit, I've taken all my physics guys through how to make and write your dot point summaries. And I have put that video up on the tutorial course in Moodle. So if you're not in my physics classes, you can watch it on the tutorial page. The video of those classes are up there. Okay? In 30 minutes, I explain how to take dot point summaries, how to decide what to put in your dot point summary, and what to do with them. So I'm not going to go through that this afternoon. Obviously, you need to do your coursework before you do the dot point summaries. Okay? When you're writing them, focus on that question. What will I need in 6 months' time? Because that's really, what do I need next month? What do I need the month after? What do I need the next month to be ready in September for that exam? Okay? And that's what you put in the dot points. You want to make it as brief as possible, but as comprehensive as it needs to be. Okay? Include what you need, but only what you need. Now, I want to go through some more research on actually learning stuff about reviewing them. And I did a bit of this on that other class, but I probably didn't put it together as much. Spacing out review of your dot points. So we're looking at dot points now. You've got your magnificent dot point summaries, and what do you do with those between now and September to make sure when you walk into that room in September, you are absolutely on top of things, okay? The first thing is space out reviews. So in your schedule, on Sunday, from 3 till 5 in the afternoon, you're always doing dot point reviews, or whatever, that's not fixed in stone, right? Whatever time suits you. But once a week, you're always reviewing dot point summaries, okay? So you review it regularly, and this week might be physics, and next week might be bio, and the one after might be physics, and then you might do chem or whatever. So you're getting one at least every 2 or 3 weeks in each subject, where you're spending a good couple of hours just reviewing the dot point summaries. Yes? Regular review, spacing out the review, helps retention. If you've got a total of 3 hours to devote to studying physics, then half an hour, 6 days, is enormously better than 3 hours all at once. Half an hour every day for 6 days gets you somewhere. 3 hours at once does not get you somewhere. Hence, cramming doesn't work. Reviewing regularly does. And one of the reasons why half an hour every day for 6 days is much better is because of in between. Okay? If you can remember ever trying to learn a physical skill, riding a bike, putting a basketball in a hoop, all those, any physical skill, okay? I'm sure you've all had the experience that sometimes, the next time you try, you seem to be able to do better than the last time you tried, okay? And the reason is this: a lot of the learning doesn't happen when you're practicing. It happens when you're asleep. Okay? Learning is this. In your brain you have billions of cells and hundreds of billions of connections. Okay? What we call synapses between the neurons. Whenever you learn something, 2 neurons form a synapse. They come together. Okay? If you then do something that strengthens that connection, you'll remember what you learned. But if you don't do anything to strengthen it, it will fade away. Okay? In fact, at this time of your life, the major thing that's going on in your brain is what we call adolescent pruning. You are going to end up with a whole lot fewer connections at the end of your adolescence than you had at the start. Things that you don't use. Neural connections that you don't use. Okay? Let me repeat. What's a neural connection? Well, when there's a connection between one neuron in, say, your language center of your brain, which represents the word dog, D-O-G, all right? When it joins with a neuron from the visual center of the brain that has an image of a dog in it, then you understand that the image of the dog is connected to the word D-O-G, and you can remember how to spell it, and you know what a dog is. Break that connection and you can't spell the word dog. Break that connection and you don't know what a dog is. Okay? Now, school is the process of trying to make and reinforce those connections. All right? I use this analogy for it. Let's say Alex accidentally scratches my desk one day. Okay? If nobody touches that intentionally, then wear and tear and abrasion and so on, the scratch is going to disappear. Okay? Friction is going to rub it out. But if he made that little accidental scratch today, and tomorrow he comes in, and he's sitting at the desk and he thinks, oh, look, there's a scratch. I'll just go over that now. And then the next day he comes in and he says, oh, I'll just go over that again. Within a very short time, that is going to be a permanent gouge. And that's what we're trying to do in school with your neuronal connections, is make these permanent by getting you to review them regularly. It's all right. Getting you to review them regularly. And a lot of those connections, the strengthening of those connections happens during REM sleep. Okay? And this is particularly true of physical skills, but it's true of cognitive skills as well. You learn while you're asleep. That's where the consolidation happens. Okay? All right. Some general tips. When you're reviewing your dot points, don't always start in the same place, or you'll end up with some parts of it really well understood and remembered and other parts more vague. Mixing up the review also. Dot points from this topic, dot points from that topic. Okay? The key thing in any of this is active recall. The most important thing you can do in terms of learning something, if you want to review something, the worst thing you can do is sit down, look at it, and read it over. In 2 milliseconds, you'll be thinking about something else. Active recall is the process of saying, this dot point is define a mechanical wave. Okay, a mechanical wave is a wave that requires a medium to propagate. Paddy has just actively recalled. Without having it in front of him, he's given it back. Okay? The fundamental frequency for a string is?
441.
Sorry?
441.
No. The formula for the fundamental. F1 equals? V on 2L. Okay? Active recall. This is why things like flashcards and so on work so well to help you learn things. Active recall is the way to remember stuff. Not just looking at it, but actively recalling it. If you've got your dot point book, if you're reviewing it, have it open on the desk, grab a bit of cardboard, cover the explanation, just have the dot point showing, walk away, on your whiteboard, just sketch out a diagram. What was the dot point all about? Explain it to somebody. Okay? Active recall is the key. Be active, move around, use a whiteboard, talk out loud. I think I've said this to you before. If you're trying to, when you recall, always check. Make sure you're not recalling the wrong material and reinforcing that. But I've said to you before, if you want to learn things, repetition is the key. And the best way of repeating something over and over again is to say it out loud. Writing it out is too slow, and while writing it out, you can very, very easily drift off and think of other things. But I defy you to daydream about something else when you're actually speaking it out loud, when you're actually thinking and forming words. It is impossible to drift off and think about something else. Okay? The other thing is, it's much faster. That a mechanical wave is a wave that requires a medium to propagate. The mechanical wave is a wave that requires a medium to propagate. A mechanical wave is a wave that requires a medium to propagate. Gave me 3 repetitions in the time that I'd write it out. Once. Yeah. Okay? All right. Now, I want to finish very quickly. Going back to the start, to self-regulation, attitudes and values. And strangely enough, I want to go back 1700 years. I want to go back to Augustine. because if you want to learn how to be a student, I would go to one of the greatest scholars of all time. This is a man who lived 1700 years ago in a small town on the outskirts of the Roman Empire. And now, 1700 years ago, 1700 years later, we still have 6 or 7 million words that he wrote. Okay? And we are still discovering more stuff that he wrote. This is a scholar of the highest order. Okay? Now, we have 4 Augustinian values that we promote at Villa, and my thesis, my argument now to you is that these 4 values are values that make you an excellent student. All right? Start with humility. If you want to do well, you need to be honest with yourself. Know your strengths and your limitations, and you use those around you to help your limitations. Okay? You need to be willing to learn from others. Don't be too proud to ask for help from us or from your peers or your parents. Okay? It takes humility to ask for help. Embrace error, particularly in learning. And that comes out of the research as well, confirms it. Work on difficult stuff. Don't always look for the easy questions. Work on hard stuff. Stuff you know you're not going to get right. Because that's where there's an opportunity to learn something. Okay? Focus on process. But more importantly than that, in the classroom and whenever you're working with your mates on subjects, focus on learning, not performing. You do not always have to be the smartest person in the room. You will not always be the smartest person in the room. You know? Don't build your identity around always getting 98 or 99%. Build your identity around always learning something. Because if your focus is on performing, you will always pick easier problems to do because you want to get them right. You want to look smart. And that means you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to be challenged. You're not going to do hard stuff and fail. But then succeed. Okay? Humility is really important. Interiority is the next one. Interiority means think deeply about things. Ask yourself questions. Examine how you do things. Is there a better way? It's interiority to ask yourself, why are we doing this in a class? What's my purpose? Okay? It has a flip side as well. Be kind to yourself. Be patient. Learning takes time. Study takes time. Don't get pissed off because you haven't got it in the first 5 minutes. It takes longer than that. Learning's hard. Okay? And be positive. Try and be positive and supportive to one another. Be confident of success. Don't be about beating others. Interiority is saying, be about the best you can be. Be the best you. Don't worry about others. Okay? Then, community. Help others and allow others to help you. Okay? This is what Augustine would say. Augustine was never, there was no such thing in Augustine's time as individual quiet reading. When you read a book, you read it out loud to other people. Okay? No such thing, no concept of individual private study. People learnt together. Okay? But you need to respect others' needs in the classroom. And that requires a bit of self-discipline. There's a time and a place. It's great to have jokes with your mates, but sometimes you've got to choose. If I say that great line that I've just thought of, it's going to disrupt us for 5 minutes, whereas I could keep it for lunch, and right? That's a very mature thing to do, and it's hard for us, but it's the right thing to do. Draw on other people's strengths and share yours, and use study groups, quiz each other. Couldn't be more important. the research says. Quiz each other about things because it involves active recall. However, it must be interspersed with time on your own studying, okay, for it to be effective. So yes, if you're doing last minute study for an exam next week and you've got a couple of hours and you've got a study group in the library, quiz for 20 minutes, go away, study for 40 minutes. Quiz for 20 minutes, go away, study for 40 minutes. Okay? Supporting each other. Finally, restless search for truth. It is good to do hard things. Okay? Keep your eye on the prize at the end of the year. Go further than what's just enough. Don't settle for first understandings. Don't look for easy problems. Look for hard things that you're going to struggle with. Okay? And do the grunt work. You can't expect to get the cream on the crop if you haven't put in the grunt work. Be about doing hard things. Doing hard things is what science is all about. And that's why it's so enjoyable. Okay. Finally, listen to what we have to say. Not because we know everything, but because in 38 years of teaching, I've generally made every mistake and I've seen every mistake. Okay? Learn from what we have to tell you. It's worth noting, in this new system, nobody is an expert. Yet, nobody is an expert in this new senior system. However, we have studied it, we've pulled it apart, tried to put it back together. We've done a whole lot of stuff with this. We've done a whole lot of learning and we've done a whole lot of examining and we've done tasks ourselves so that we can best help you to navigate the new system. We think we're there, but we'll continue to learn over the next few years as students come through. But have confidence that we know what we're doing. Okay? And simply work with us. All right? Ask for help anytime you need it. Ask in the right way, but ask for help anytime you need it. Okay? So, that's it. Any burning questions? Because I know Menez is trying to get out the door.
Bye, Menez.
Any burning questions at the moment? All right. This PowerPoint and the video I'll put up on Moodle on the tutorial page, okay? Which is this one, which I think comes up on your list as TUT, right? Now, this is where you book into afternoon tutorials, but it's also where we've put, for example, that's the video that I linked you to in your email and none of you watched. That's the Senior Skills workshop from last week. You don't need to watch that because you've been here. This is the class on creating and reviewing dot point summaries. And then we've got some other videos that we've used over the years. The Headspace Mindfulness Meditation Starter is here. So that's 10 minutes a day, learn meditation process, okay? The other stuff's not much use. That one is, and I can thoroughly recommend it, okay? Oh, I've timed out. It's 10 days of 10 minutes a day. Okay, try it and see what you think. When I first started it, I did it first thing in the morning. It's good first thing in the morning or last thing at night, 10 minutes. Okay? Learn to meditate, learn to calm yourself, learn to relieve stress. Great stuff. Okay. Alex.
So you said you were going to touch on sleep. So was
Oh.
that the
Well, sleep was about the learning.
Yeah.
That if you don't get good sleep, you don't consolidate the learning that happens.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Are there any tips for getting like good sleep? Like, should you have your phone in your room?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stuff online about getting a good sleep. Don't have screens in your room. In fact, don't have chargers anywhere near your bed because that's a bit of a health hazard.